Here tomorrow, we'll see the start of the long-awaited infected blood inquiry. The contaminated blood scandal of the 1970s and 1980s is often called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. Almost 5,000 people with the blood disorder haemophilia were given a treatment contaminated with hepatitis and, in many cases, HIV. Around 2,500 people are thought to have died as a result. Well, the inquiry, which will be chaired by Sir Bryan Longstaff, comes after years of campaigning from victims and their families. Well, we're joined now in the studio by Clair Walton, who's been personally affected by this scandal. Hi there, Claire. Thank you for coming in. You lost your husband as a result of the contaminated blood scandal. Just tell us about how you found out, first of all, that he was affected.
He was taken into the hospital for routine, what we thought was a routine blood test, and he was told that he had HIV, and that basically he would die. There was no cure at the time. This was 1985, and he was told to just live whatever life he had, perhaps 2 or 3 years, and that news absolutely devastated us. We were newly married. We'd only got married in May of 1983, so we were young. We had all our life ahead of us. We had plans to have children. We'd just bought our own home. And so, yes. And it was, if you think about the context of the 1980s, when HIV, when AIDS first hit, we could tell no one.
Because that was the thing, wasn't it? It was the fear back then. People didn't understand the disease, and there was a real taboo about HIV and AIDS. So what support were you given after you were given that news?
Nothing. We had nothing. We were sent home, and we just had to fend for ourselves, really. It was a pretty traumatic time, and the things we were seeing on the television just impacted it more, that we needed to be quiet. So we silenced. We were silenced. We silenced ourselves. And that still has a sort of resonance to this day, in that when you've been through that sort of traumatic experience, then it's very frightening to even talk about it, even today. And then he died. He died, sadly, of a terrible, terrible, horrendous illness at the age of 34 in 1993.
And so, were you able to tell people why he died?
No, I told people he had died of cancer, and that was acceptable. And you would have the sympathetic nod. There was no way in that time, and it's only in probably the last year or two that I start to tell people why he actually died.
But it wasn't his fault at all. Why did you feel like that, do you think?
Because there's such a stigma, and it's still there. There is still a stigma. There's still a stigma. I lived in London after he died. I came to live in London. It was a very different place in London, I think, when you can be a lot more anonymous. But out in the sort of countryside, out in small villages, in small towns where I live now, it's just not something you still talk about. So there was a
double punishment for you, that kind of tragedy, and then social ostracism almost as well.
Yes. And of course there were 1,243 haemophiliacs that were given, who were told that they had HIV. Over 1,000 of them are dead. But there's also by 1988, certainly, there was 40 wives who'd become infected through their husbands. And that, again, is rarely spoken about. And that's what I'm hoping, or it certainly will come out in the public inquiry.
What do you want to get from the public inquiry? I know that sounds like a ridiculous question, but presumably there's a myriad of things you want.
Accountability and responsibility. Obviously we want to know how this happened, why it happened, could it have been avoided, and then what appears to be a cover-up, was there a cover-up, and what happened in the aftermath, what sort of support we received. The government denied any responsibility at the time, yet set up a charitable trust, an arm's-length charitable trust, which was independent, which was solely funded by the Department of Health, appointed Department of Health trustees and Haemophilia Society trustees. And taking that charitable trust and calling it to account has been very difficult. And so out of the inquiry, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that happen. And to find out whether my husband, death was avoidable, which, I obviously have my own feelings about it, but I believe Sir Bryan Langstaff will do a thorough job. I've met him on a couple of occasions, and I have, the way he's approached us, the way he's sought our opinions for the terms of reference, and he has put into the terms of reference just about everything we've asked for. So it's going to be.
You have hopes. Yeah, you have hopes for that.
I do. As long as we, those infected and affected, actually have the legal representation that we require.
Your life has been sort of so totally dominated by this. There's no way away from it. So let's say every day, every moment, this is your life.
It is. And I'd like to see the end to that. I'd like to see it put to bed in some way. And I'd like it on record. And I particularly want on record, probably for a younger generation, just how appalling people who were diagnosed.
It's an extraordinary scandal, really, when you think it's just amazing that it happened and that nobody's been called to account. No. There's been nothing, really, has there? No.
There's been nothing, but also it's been said that it's the largest peacetime disaster.
Absolutely.
And yet it's hardly mentioned. You talk to people and they don't even know about it, and it's...
Claire, everybody listening will wish you the very best. I mean, it sounds a sort of puerile thing to say, but both of us will be thinking of you at the moment. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Thanks for coming to see us.